Hey, how are you doing?
I am good. The sagging cable in my backyard is also doing quite well.
Well, I hope they come and look at it soon.
I hope so. It looks like it's probably the cables / internet,
Oh,
which I get through Comcast.
yeah, of
You know,
course.
that company that was once dragged before Congress to
Yes,
explain why its customer service and tech support sucked so badly.
yes. Well, yeah, and I don't think it's improved um, since then. But hopefully, we can make it through this podcast without your internet going out.
It doesn't look like anything's broken. It's just sagging lower and lower and lower.
Oh, okay. I wonder if like all the rain has
Yeah, that could be.
eroded like whatever was supporting it, or yeah.
That could be.
Okay, well, shall we get started?
Sure.
Okay. Welcome to Goodnight, Mr. Holmes, a podcast about the Granada Sherlock Holmes, which ran on ITV in the UK between 1984 and 1994 and ran on Masterpiece Mystery in the US around the same time. I'm Laura.
And I'm Rachel.
Today we're looking at episode 16 in the series, which is called The Musgrave Ritual.
The story was first published in The Strand in 1893.
So, while this is the fourth episode in the Return of Sherlock Holmes series, it was actually filmed second after the Priory School, which was filmed first. So the order they're showing them in is not the order they filmed them in. And the screenwriter.
But I thought the Abbey Grange was the first one that they did with New Watson.
Yes, Abbey Grange was the first. Priory School was the second.
Okay.
And this is the third.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. No, that's my mistake. But the screenwriter Jeremy Paul won an Edgar Allan Poe Award from the Mystery Writers of America for the screenplay.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It was pretty good, I have to say.
Yeah. I liked it a lot. So we open in the English countryside, and this well-dressed man with impressive sideburns is walking away from a huge oak tree. He looks around, and then he goes through the woods to the stable, where he climbs up into the hayloft and sits down, and he unfolds a piece of paper looking puzzled. and he envisions a 17th century man with a plumed hat, so a cavalier, riding up to the tree on a horse and then riding away. And at that point, a young woman walks over to him and just lifts up her skirt. And he starts kissing her, and they do a literal roll in the hay. And down below, there's another woman. She sees like little bits of hay falling through the cracks in the floor of the loft. And she peeps up into the hayloft and frowns, and then clatters back down and out the door. The man stops kissing the young woman when he hears the sounds, but as soon as the barn door closes, he goes back to kissing her. As we find out a little later, the man is Richard Brunton, a butler. The young woman is Janet, the gamekeeper's daughter, and the other woman is Rachel Howell, who's a housemaid.
There's a little love triangle happening here.
Exactly, yes. Then we are watching as a trap containing Holmes and Watson traverses a country road. Watson's going on about the air and the shooting and the fishing and the food that they're about to partake of, while Holmes is
shooting and fishing. Those sound like activities Sherlock Holmes would be interested in.
Right, exactly, yes. Holmes is wrapped up in this series of blankets, and he's coughing, and he's groaning.
Coughing.
Yes, groaning at Watson's enthusiasm. They're going to the home of Reginald Musgrave, an old school acquaintance of Holmes's, a few years below him, with a nature of extreme natural diffidence. As you know, all of the finest aristocrats must have, right? The sprezzatura, I can't be too good at anything. Musgrave is the scion of one of the oldest families in England, and Holmes drones on a bit about how he never thinks of Musgrave without thinking of gray archways, mullioned windows, and all of the venerable wreckage of a feudal keep.
Yeah, apparently it's been discussed among Holmes fans, scholars,
Sherlockians.
Sherlockians, and the consensus is that Holmes went to Oxford rather than Cambridge, though it's not clear what college in Oxford he went to.
Well, that also, I mean, Oxford itself has a lot of gray archways and mullions.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think the kicker was that I think Gloria Scott. It's mentioned that
No.
some student had a dog, which is forbidden in Cambridge, and so Sherlockians were like, "Well, then it's Oxford, clearly."
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Got it. Oxford's fun. I've been there. I liked it a lot. The city, I mean, it's a beautiful city.
I haven't been there. I always think of Inspector Morse.
Yeah.
Oxford.
Yep. Exactly. Watson asks Holmes why, if he doesn't like Musgrave, he accepted the invitation to come out. To escape my lethargy, Holmes says, and your constant bullying to tidy our room in Baker Street. Holmes has brought a small trunk of papers.
Yes, and Watson says it was hardly constant. It must have been bad, given what Watson will put up with.
Yeah, yes, that is true. So Holmes has got this small trunk of papers, his early work before he had met Watson, and he's going to spend the visit sorting through it all, he says. A record of the Tarleton murders, the case of Vanbury, the wine merchants, the adventure of the old Russian woman, a full account of Ricoletti, of the club foot, and his abominable wife, and the singular affair of the aluminium crutch. Holmes rattles off.
And Watson asks, aluminium crutch, in a way that made me think, okay, maybe that's not usual for that time period. So I looked it up, and crutches were made of wood in the 19th century.
That makes sense, yeah. And at this point, Watson takes out his notebook, and he's because this all predates him, and he wants to make some notes. But Holmes just says, "Now that was something a little recherché." I wish I had notes of these cases, Watson says, and Holmes puts his feet loudly on top of the little trunk and says, yes, my boy. And he just looks completely peeved. Like he really doesn't want to be there. And they keep going through a wooden gate. And Watson says, surely the house must interest you. The house is freezing, Holmes says. And Watson says, it's history with people in. On your previous visit, I remember you telling me that you enjoyed some lively conversations with the butler.
Yeah, which is not really something people
no, they didn't talk to them.
Like, servants were like furniture.
Right, exactly. Yes, and we'll see more of that of the butler like interrupting that dynamic.
Yes.
Holmes remarks that the butler Brunton is a young school teacher out of place, meaning he's not teaching anymore. Brunton speaks several languages and plays numerous musical instruments and is, Holmes says, a man of considerably more intellectual ability than his master. So there's some friction there.
Yeah.
As they pull up to the front entrance, Holmes then says, Watson, we must behave ourselves. As if Watson had thought of doing anything else. And I kind of took that as a note to self on Holmes's part. And he proceeds not to behave himself at all.
Yeah. Yeah, he's pretty obnoxious for the first half of this.
Yeah, he really is. Brunton is waiting for them in the entryway. It's kind of like a bridge over a moat. It's not like a drawbridge. It's like asphalt over this moat that surrounds the house.
Yeah, I didn't. It's not really clear, like whether it's a moat or a canal or like it's this water thing.
There's a waterway. Yeah,
the bridge over it.
Musgrave comes out to greet them while the servants manage the luggage, and he and Holmes walk ahead. And Holmes is pretending to catch up with Musgrave, acting like he's civilized. But he makes the mistake of asking, "How is the dear wife?" And Musgrave, startled, points out that he's not married. In an attempt to salvage the situation, Holmes then says, "How wise." Meanwhile, Brunton is giving Watson, and therefore us, a bit of history about the Musgraves. They came from the north of the country, which I wasn't clear whether that meant Scotland or just northern England.
I don't know.
And the house is the oldest inhabited home in the county. A cadet branch of the northern Musgraves broke away from the family and came to this location in West Sussex in the early 17th century. And these dates are going to be important later. Next, we see Watson dressed for dinner, coming to fetch Holmes, who's washing
in a white tie, so it's pretty formal.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. and Holmes is washing his face and sneezing. Watson catches sight of Holmes's syringe. It's been used, and he's dismayed. Holmes is back on the coke, which explains his somewhat manic behavior. And I was reading in Bending the Willow that this was Jeremy Brett's own idea. Like it's not in the story.
Oh, okay.
But according to the author of Bending the Willow, in truth, I think we can now see that this unsettled behavior had more to do with Jeremy's own demons than any of Sherlock Holmes's. So again, the bipolar.
I mean, does it though? Or I mean, if it was Jeremy Brett's idea, that it seems like that's taking something away from his ability as an actor and his artistry as an actor to just assume that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's valid. Yeah, for sure. And by this point, Brett was really inhabiting Holmes and making these creative decisions. But yeah, I think the author of that book, I don't know. I mean, it's clear as the series goes on that Brett is kind of physically deteriorating, and the drugs that he's taking are making him bloated. But he might be putting too much importance on that.
Yeah, it does sound like he's right. He like that book was written with a particular viewpoint.
Yeah, yeah. Although Jeremy Brett helped the author in writing the book. And was apparently like all for the project. So, I mean, who knows? He died before the book came out.
Yeah.
But the next scene, we see Holmes, who is also in white tie for dinner, but still wearing that hideous gray blanket. He's sitting on the floor in front of a blazing fire, warming his hands and giggling like a maniac.
To himself. To
himself, yes. And Brunton asks if he'd like more brandy, and Holmes says no. Clearly, he's had something much more fun. Musgrave and Watson, I was actually kind of glad he had the brandy to kind of put a ceiling on him, so he wouldn't bounce too high. Musgrave and Watson come into the dining room, also in white tie, and Musgrave is telling Watson a story about an ancestor who fought at Edgehill, an indecisive battle that prolonged the English Civil War for 4 more years.
Yeah, it was signed. His commission was signed by Prince Rupert.
Yes.
Or Ralph Musgrave. Prince Rupert is probably Prince Rupert of the Rhine, the Duke of Cumberland, who became famous. I mean, he's got quite the backstory, but for the purpose of the Musgrave Ritual, he was famous as a cavalry commander for the Royalist army during the English Civil War. So he was on the side of Charles I.
And he was Charles I's nephew.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah. And he became the top, Royalist general. When Cromwell won the war, Rupert was banished, but he came back to England during the Restoration and was eventually made governor of the Hudson's Bay Company, which still exists today.
Oh, does it?
It's now a holding company for department stores headquartered in Canada. But back then, it was the start of a 200-year trade monopoly. So Watson is very impressed by all this history, and Holmes looks bored. Musgrave points out a boot of his ancestor that was worn on the day of the Battle of Edgehill, or so he thinks, until Brunton interrupts them and says the boot was actually worn by the ancestor's brother at the Battle of Naseby.
Yeah, that battle took place on June 14th, 1645, and Oliver Cromwell's army basically destroyed the Royalist army.
Mhm.
Charles didn't surrender for another year, but this
Right.
battle was pretty much the end of any real chance he had at winning. So
Exactly.
this is why when Brunton makes that statement, Holmes bursts out laughing.
Right.
It's it's something that the family was presenting as, we have this proud, honorable tradition, and here's a souvenir from it. And well, no, actually, it's a relic of an embarrassment.
Yes. And Holmes cannot stop laughing. Musgrave is embarrassed, but he concedes that the schoolmaster must be correct. He dismisses Brunton, but before Brunton leaves, Musgrave asks about Rachel, and Brunton replies that she has slight distemper, sir, and I told her to go to her room.
Right here, actually, recording a podcast.
I'm sorry?
Rachel is right here recording a podcast.
Yes. I did give a lot of thought to that, actually. Because every time someone says Laura at work, and every job I've had has had multiple Lauras, my head just like jerks back.
Yeah, search engines really suck these days, so I wasn't able to figure out what a 19th century man would mean by distemper.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, we find out there's history there, and
she's Welsh.
Yes. Yes. Yes, very excitable. For God's sake. I remember in The Crown, Princess Anne asking Prince Charles when he was studying Welsh at the university in Aberystwyth, asking him if he was surrounded by people who were short, hairy, and grouchy or something. Short, hairy, and angry. So these stereotypes are just awful. So Brunton leaves the room, but not before looking carefully around. And Holmes, even though he's high, takes note of this. And when he leaves, Holmes busts out laughing again, and this time is joined by Watson, who tells a rather puzzled Musgrave, Holmes has told me of Brunton's extraordinary gift. I remember on my last visit, he spent several hours explaining to me in French, and here Holmes is giggling again. The origins of a piccolo. It is wonderful that he should be satisfied for so long with such a position, Watson says, but I suppose he's been comfortable and lacked the energy to make a change. Like, why is this bright guy?
Yeah. Yeah, I would like a look at his references, actually.
And Musgrave says somewhat sarcastically, oh yes, indeed, the butler of Hurlstone. It is always a thing that is remembered by all who visit us. So he really doesn't like this guy. But Musgrave said he is a bit of a Don Juan. When he was married, he was all right, but since he's become a widower, we've had no end of trouble with him. A few months ago, we were in the hopes that he was about to settle down again. He became engaged to Rachel Howells, my second housemaid, but he's thrown her over and taken up with Janet Tregallis, my gamekeeper's daughter. Rachel's a very good girl, but she is of an excitable Welsh temperament. Now she wanders around like a black-eyed shadow, thoroughly unsettling the household.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The English conquered the Welsh hundreds of years ago, annexed the country, and they set about doing their best to destroy their language and
Yes,
culture.
and their culture. Yeah.
So, if you're going to do that and not have to sit with the fact that you're the bad guy, you demonize the people you've conquered.
As less than, absolutely. And flawed, fundamentally flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Michael Sheen, the actor, is a big proponent of getting rid of the position of the Prince of Wales.
Yeah, because it's kind of an insult.
Yeah, exactly. And that episode of The Crown where Prince Charles goes to the University of Wales to study Welsh, he's being taught by a Welsh nationalist who really doesn't want to be doing it.
Yeah.
It's a really good episode of that kind of like, what do we do? Because we've had this conquest all these years ago, and none of the current players are the antagonists.
Hmm.
but we're stuck with the legacy.
Yeah, but there's still.
Oh, yes.
So if any of our 3 listeners want to learn more about this, there's a trilogy of novels that are really well researched and well written by Sharon K. Penman that
Oh,
start
yeah.
with There Be Dragons.
Yes. Yes. No, that's a good one. Yeah. So the next scene, we see Brunton in the butler's pantry, and he's playing a flute while Rachel is looking in at him through the doorway. Brunton calls out to her, but she doesn't come in. He goes back to playing his flute. And you were a flute player, correct? So this is not a traditional silver flute. It's some kind of medieval adjacent flute made out of wood. It's played sideways, so it's not a recorder.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
It's not an oboe.
No, it's a flute.
Yeah, he's blowing into it.
I'd be interested to know what it was made of. There was a girl when I was in orchestra in high school who had a golden flute.
Ooh, wow.
Very
Wow. Wow. That's kind of, I don't know. What's the word?
show off.
Well, alienating to everybody else who doesn't have.
Yeah.
That's some posturing right there.
Yeah. She was very good.
Oh,
But
Lord.
yeah,
That's
she
even worse.
she wasn't terribly well liked.
That is even worse. Okay, so at breakfast the next day, Holmes, back in his blanket, is sitting at the table with Musgrave, who's reading the paper. Watson comes in. He's dressed in country tweeds, +4s, and his cute little like tweed coat that he has. And he sits down while Rachel pours him coffee. And Holmes abruptly says, "Where's Brunton this morning?" And Rachel spills the coffee on Watson.
Yeah, and Holmes is just kind of looking around as he says that and like,
yeah,
no, let me start some trouble here. I'm bored.
Exactly.
He's clearly still high at this point.
And bored. He wants to start some drama.
Yeah.
So Rachel spills the coffee on Watson. Watson jumps up from his chair. She apologizes, and he tries to reassure her, but she faints. "My dear woman," Watson says, feeling her forehead, "you should not be at work. You should be in bed." Musgrave excuses Rachel and tells her to come back when she's feeling stronger. She protests, but Watson insists, and Musgrave does too, and firmly tells her to tell Brunton to come see him. And Rachel says, "The butler's gone." "Gone? Gone where?" Musgrave demands. "He's gone. He's not in his room. No one's seen him. Oh, yes, he's gone. He's gone." And she sinks to the floor in presumably Welsh hysterics, laughing and crying at the same time, wailing loudly. Musgrave rings for the footmen who scurry in and pick her up, and Watson follows along behind, saying, "Gently, gently, it's all right, gently, Rachel," as Musgrave follows him. So this parade leaves the room.
Yeah, and Holmes is sitting alone at the table
in his stupid blanket.
On his face, like, wow, that was weird. And just only smoking a cigarette.
Next, Holmes is in Brunton's room. He observes the row of Brunton's shoes on the floor, the nightstand. He flings back the covers on the bed and stifles a yawn. So he's crashing down from the cocaine. And he begins to lie down.
Yeah, he starts to lie down in bed.
When Musgrave comes into the room, at which point Holmes makes like he's been investigating thoroughly. "The bed's not been slept in. Have you searched the rest of the house?"
Well, he's not in his bed. I don't feel him here.
Right. And Musgrave confirms, "From the cellar to the garret, the girl's right. There's no trace of him." And Holmes snaps at this point into detective mode. "Difficult to see how the man could have left. I mean, the windows and doors are all fastened, and what man goes away in the middle of the night and leaves all of his possessions behind? Money, watch." At which point Watson enters. "I've given the girl something to calm down, and I've taken the liberty of sending for a local nurse. She's in a most unusual state and should on no account be left alone for a while." And Holmes says, "This is the girl who was engaged to Brunton."
I know they keep saying girl, but she looks like she's in her 30s.
Yeah, she clearly is in her 30s. Musgrave says yes, and Watson asks, adds with a girl with a fiery Welsh temper. And he's flexing his hand and dabbing at it with a handkerchief. So it looks like she bit him. Which, good for her.
That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Musgrave apologizes and proposes that they continue their plans for a shoot. Antibiotics have not been invented, so it's not even a question that Watson's going to get his human bite treated. The human bite is like one of the most infectious.
Yeah.
I remember when a kid bit Olivia in preschool, and we had to take her to get an antibiotic shots, and the parents of the biter were deeply offended. And I just remember the administrator saying, no, this is standard procedure.
Yeah.
And so Musgrave apologizes. He proposes that they continue their plans for a shoot and will return, hopefully, to some simple explanation. And he leaves.
Let's go have fun by killing living creatures for our own entertainment.
It is, yes, the aristocrats and their blood sports.
Yeah.
He leaves the room with Watson. Holmes falls back into the bed, snuggling into his blanket.
Yes.
Finally, they've left me alone. We see the men returning from the shoot. Watson's got a pheasant that he's very proud of. He sees Holmes sitting on a bench on the lawn, and he holds the bird up for him to see like a little boy. And Holmes obliges him.
Well done, Watson. And I have a note like a parent would to a child.
Exactly. Yeah. See what I did. And Watson and Musgrave join Holmes on the bench. Holmes, I was telling Watson something happened last night, which may throw some light on this matter, says Musgrave. This is very embarrassing, but I find I need your advice, which, okay, that's why he's there.
Yeah, Holmes straightens up like, of course you need my advice.
Yes. I couldn't sleep after foolishly taking that cup of cafe noir after dinner. Yeah, never do that. Make it decaf.
Yeah, black coffee is basically
what
he's saying in Aristo talk.
At about 2:00, I gave up the struggle. I came downstairs to fetch a novel I'm reading, which I left in the library. Well, you can imagine my surprise when I saw a glimmer of light coming from the open door. And we're seeing this play out. Musgrave is in his nightshirt and robe with a candle at the threshold to the library. I remembered I'd extinguished the lamp and closed the door when we were tired. Naturally, my first thought was of burglars who go into a library and steal all kinds of
Books.
Exactly. Musgrave then takes down an old battle axe from a display on the wall. He pushes the library door open a bit and sees Brunton sitting in an easy chair reading through some archival papers. And Musgrave crashes the door open loudly, and Brunton jumps up and turns around. Okay, so servants were never supposed to sit on the furniture. They said, if they were going to sit, they sat downstairs in the servants' hall or upstairs in their rooms. But they never sat down in the rest of the house.
Yeah, and they didn't go digging through
papers.
Yeah, really anything.
Right. Yes. So this is a major infraction.
Yeah, it's like your vacuum cleaner starts leafing through your checkbook.
Oh, God. So this is how you repay my trust, prying into my family documents. You will leave my service tomorrow, Musgrave says. And Brunton says nothing. He just walks past Musgrave out of the library. And Musgrave picks up the documents and looks at them before putting them back in the drawer where they were kept. But Brunton comes back. Mr. Musgrave, sir, I can't bear disgrace. I've always been proud about my station in life, and disgrace will kill me. My blood will be on your head, sir. It will indeed if you drive me to despair, Brunton says.
No, get out of my house.
Threatening suicide always works. Musgrave is horrified and shocked and stunned at the insolence. If you cannot keep me after this, then for God's sake, let me give you notice and leave in a month as of my own free will, Brunton says. I want this too long, says Musgrave.
Really? Get out.
My question is, why is he even arguing with Brunton?
Yeah, for real, get out of the house. Why did he even have Brunton there for so long, considering that he clearly didn't like the man?
Yeah. And it sounds right then and there like he's willing to bargain. And if I were Musgrave, I would not be having any of that. Yeah. Out on his ass. Just get out. I could stand that, Mr. Musgrave, but not to be cast out before all the folk I know so well, Brunton says.
Well, then leave now.
Right. You don't deserve consideration, Brunton. Your conduct has been infamous. Musgrave is just so indignant, but he calms himself. However, I have no wish to bring public disgrace on you. You'll take yourself away in a week, and you give whatever reason you like. A week, sir? Only a week? A fortnight. Say at least a fortnight, Brunton says.
Get out.
Right. Like this conversation has already gone on too long. No, a week, and you may consider yourself to have been very leniently dealt with, Musgrave says. And Brunton bows his head a bit, and he leaves. Back at the bench outside, Musgrave continues, but what is strange is that he seemed most anxious to stay. Watson says, well, it's quite plain to me what happened. He went back to his room, thought it over, decided to stage his disappearance there and then, cleverly, possibly with the help of his new woman friend. Janet? No, she lives with her father on the other side of the lake. And besides, I doubt if she had the wit to help him, Musgrave says.
I really like that line, actually.
So charitable. Holmes says, this piece of paper, which Brunton thought worth his while to consult, even at the risk of losing his job? Well, it's nothing. It's nothing of any importance at all, Musgrave says. Nevertheless, Holmes says, and he gets up off the bench, throws his blankets dramatically around himself, and he walks off without another word. And then we're back in the library, and Musgrave is unlocking the drawer that holds the documents. And I was thinking, has no one heard of a filing cabinet? But then I looked it up. Filing cabinets were invented in 1886 in the US. The original story, even though it was published in 1893, takes place well before, because in the original, Watson merely frames the story before, because it takes place before Holmes even met him. So, yeah, filing cabinets hadn't been invented then. It's simply a copy of the singular old observance called the Musgrave Ritual, Musgrave says. He pulls the paper out, he hands it to Holmes, a ceremony peculiar to our family, which each Musgrave has to go through on his coming of age. Presumably only the male Musgraves.
Yes.
Holmes is genuinely puzzled here, and he's engaged. This is when the gears like click in.
Yeah, well, and the nap has also clearly done him good.
He's
Not high anymore.
He's rested. It's a strange catechism, undated, but written in the style of the middle of the 17th century. Would you and Watson be good enough to read it out to me? Oh, doctor, I know it by heart, says Musgrave, and he turns the paper towards Watson, and they alternate lines.
Yeah, it's kind of a call and response thing.
Yeah. Whose was it? His who is gone. Who shall have it? He who will come. Where was the sun? Over the oak. Where was the shadow? Under the elm. How was it stepped? West 8x8, south 7x7, west 6x6, south 5x5, and 2x2, and so under. What shall we give for it? All that is ours. Why should we give it? For the sake of the trust. And Holmes snatches the paper away from them and walks to the window, where he's reading it again, kind of by the light. And Watson says, it's a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
I remember as children, we often tried to solve it, but it leads nowhere, says Musgrave. Could Brunton have seen this before last night? Holmes asks. It's possible, says Musgrave. We took no pains to hide it. But what could he want with it? Obviously, he was refreshing his memory, Holmes says. You say that he had some map or chart, which he thrust back into his pocket the moment you appeared.
Yeah, I was wondering why Musgrave never said anything about that at the time. Like,
right.
Did you just steal one of my family documents?
Yes, exactly. That's what it looked like, Musgrave says. Yes, remember he's in the opening scene, Brunton is looking at this map or chart in the hayloft.
Yeah.
And Holmes says, we must re-examine this ritual. The measurements obviously refer to some exact spot to which the rest of the document alludes. We are given two guides, an elm and an oak, Watson helpfully supplies. And gentlemen, says Holmes, there is a patriarch among oaks. He points out the window to the giant tree that we saw in the opening scene. The men then walk outside. It's raining. They each have an umbrella. Certainly, it's the oldest oak on the estate, Musgrave is telling them. This tree must have been here at the time of the Norman conquests, Holmes says. In all probability, but I tell you, it can't be the oak referred to, Holmes, Musgrave responds. Generations of Musgraves have attempted to solve it. They've dug up half this field. So Holmes pops around.
The governor must have been thrilled with that.
Yes. pops around the back of the tree and holds up a compass, and he's making some mental calculations. You are right, Musgrave, he says. This is not the oak referred to in the ritual. Are there any other large oaks in the immediate vicinity? Not within a mile of the house, says Musgrave. It's thundering at this point, and these men are stood under the largest tree for miles around. Probably not the safest course right then. And where was the sun? Over the oak, Holmes mutters. We can make nothing of it today, old man. The weather's turned. As usual, Watson has, as Holmes has previously noted, a blazing talent for the obvious. Back inside, Rachel's in bed. The nurse who came to mind her has fallen asleep in the chair next to her. Rachel snatches up an old bag from the floor with something in it, and she clasps it to herself and gets out of bed. In her nightgown, she leaves the house and runs into the woods.
In a very, 1980s kind of way.
Yes, owls and crows are hooting. She's clearly terrified. She's yelling incoherently. She runs to the lake, and there's an enormous splash.
Yeah, and my note is 5 miles away in another TV show, something falls into the river.
Yes. The next morning, workmen are dredging the lake. Musgrave, Holmes, still in that.
They don't think that anybody's dead, so what are they dredging the river for?
Good point. No clue. You're right. They don't think anybody's dead at that point. They think that they've run off.
Yeah. Even Rachel, they're like, oh, she's probably
run off with her man. Yeah. Holmes is still wearing his blanket. And the three men are observing the workmen dredging. I have that Musgrave is assuming that Rachel threw herself into the lake and drowned, but they just haven't found a body yet. I don't know why he would assume that, though. This scene makes sense.
Yeah, I don't either. And I feel like it seemed later like they were assuming she had run away, that she wasn't in the river.
Exactly. Yes, because the ending. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
One of the workmen yells out, "I found something," and Holmes rushes off to where the workman is, and they're pulling up an old.
So Watson says, "Hey, there's no body found yet, which should be helpful." Then this man says to Musgrave that they found nothing so far. They covered just about all of it. Then another man,
yes,
who was clearly biding his time until the first man said they found nothing, calls out that they found something. Yeah, he found it half an hour ago. He was just waiting for his chance to embarrass the first guy.
So they're pulling up this old bag, which is waterlogged, like a burlap bag. And Holmes grabs it and rips it open, and it's filled with crap. And Musgrave says, it could have been anyone at any time. No, recently, or the water would have rotted the bag, Holmes says. His blanket has mysteriously disappeared at this point. I've been tracking the course of this blanket over the episode. The maid last night, says Watson, it would have explained her journey to the mirror, but then where did she go? So they don't. Yeah, again, they're assuming.
So like, why are
they dredging the river or the lake? Holmes is frustrated. Back at the house, in some kind of terracotta bowl, big bowl, Watson and Musgrave are examining the contents of the bag. So there's a lot of mud and some old rotted metal pieces. There's nothing here, Holmes, Watson says. It's just a mass of rusted and discolored metal and some pebbles. And where is Breton or Rachel? And why should anybody bother to throw it into the lake? Musgrave says. Holmes is across the room, studying the document that contains the ritual. I'm convinced that there are not 3 mysteries here, but only one, and the solution of one may prove the solution of the others. Apparently, Breton saw something in this which escaped your forebears, Musgrave, from which he expected some personal advantage. If I can read it aright, I hold in my hand the clue to the truth concerning both the butler and the maid Howells. And he repeats the ritual. They go back outside. Now it's sunny. Holmes, still without his blanket, points to a spot on the lawn. So this is where it grew. I suppose it's impossible to tell me how high it was. Oh, I can give you that at once, says Musgrave. It was 64 feet. Holmes looks surprised. It was my old tutor, Musgrave said. used to give me lessons in trigonometry. When I was a lad, I used to know the height of every tree and building on this estate. Okay. I am grateful to your tutor, says Holmes. Tell me, did Brunton ever ask you such a question here on this lawn? Now that you call it to my mind, Musgrave says, and we're in a memory of his. Brunton is pacing the lawn and smoking. And Musgrave comes over, younger Musgrave comes over to him and says, Brunton, what are you doing here? Enjoying the evening, sir, says Brunton. This is my private lawn, exclaims Musgrave. So again, servants are not allowed to enjoy.
Yeah, the life of a servant is not
Awful.
a great one.
Absolutely awful. You'll pardon me for asking, sir. The elm that once stood here that was struck by lightning, you wouldn't remember the height of it, would you, sir? Brunton asks. Why would you want to know that, says Musgrave.
And Brunton channels Holmes from the Blue Carbuncle here.
Yes, I'm arguing with Mr. Tregallis about it. I say it was 50 feet. He puts it higher. We have a small wager on it.
Hmm.
Oh, well, you've lost your wager, Brunton. It was 64 feet, Musgrave stupidly tells him. I shall have to be a good sport and pay up then, says Brunton, and he walks away. But then he turns and he looks up the weather vane on top of the house. And usually weather vanes, they have a rooster on top. But
yeah.
This weather vane has an oak tree with a cavalier riding towards it in silhouette. So back in the present, things begin to dawn on Musgrave. Oh, good Lord, he says. Now we must find where the shadow of the elm would have fallen when the sun is just clear of that oak, meaning the oak on the weather vane, Holmes says.
That's actually pretty clever.
Yes. Well, that'll be difficult, Holmes, since the elm is no longer here, says Watson. Again, with the blazingly obvious. Oh, come now, Watson. If Brunton can do it, then so can we. The answer lies in trigonometry.
How does he know that Brunton did it? For all the evidence they have, Brunton was kidnapped by aliens. Like,
right.
All they know is that he's just not here.
I mean, Conan Doyle, again, not the most consistent dude.
What plot hole? I'm just going to keep writing.
Drive right through it with a Mack truck. Musgrave, I need all the fishing rods you have in the hall. So back inside, Watson's tying ropes, measuring against a yardstick. Holmes is whittling a peg. I don't quite follow.
Yeah, he's sharpening a stake. Like he's just deduced that Brunton was killed by a vampire and wants to.
And Watson says, I don't quite follow this. Ah, splendid, Holmes says. Musgrave brings in the fishing rods and Holmes spreads them all out on the floor. And he asks Watson for the measuring stick and measures one of the rods. He's about to make a triangle. Now, will you take the last yard of that string and tie it to the base of the fishing rod, Watson? He says. Yes, and when you've done that, will you bring the ritual and join me on the lawn? Back on the lawn, Holmes plants the fishing rod in the ground, eyes the weather vane, and then the shadow of the rod on the grass. And Watson reports that the shadow is 9 feet long. So the calculation is now a simple one. If a fishing rod of 6 feet throws a shadow of 9 feet, then a tree of 64 feet will throw one of 98, says Watson. 96, says Musgrave. Yes, of course, says Watson, because he's not a math major.
Yeah, I did not take trig in high school, and it wouldn't have mattered if I had, because my high school had the math classes taught by gym teachers.
Oh, God.
Didn't really understand math either.
Oh, my God. I took trig. I loved it. It was just, geometry on steroids with, a smattering of algebra. I had a great time. Then I got to calculus, and I was asked to leave the class. It really was. The professor in college, I didn't take it in high school, I took it in college, and the professor was like, you're going to fail. Take another science course instead for your STEM credit. And the line of one, of course, will be the line of the other, says Holmes, and he walks out and crouches down. Watson, look, 2 inches from mine. The mark made by Brunton, says Watson. Watson then reads out the steps of the ritual. We've heard this now 3 times. While Holmes follows his compass in response to each step, he's completely forgotten his blanket. They're racing all around the front lawn of the estate according to the directions of the ritual, and they are brought to the moat or waterway that surrounds the manor house. And there's a door in the house that opens onto this waterway. Musgrave rows them all of like,
Yeah, it's a nice transition. So you see Holmes staring at the door, and the camera hands in on zooms in on him,
yes,
and then zooms down, and you now see him like standing on this little boat, like he's General Washington
yes.
Square.
It's a tiny boat. They're crammed in there.
Yeah.
And he insists on standing up. And they only have a little way to go. It's like, it's like 3 yards.
Yeah.
But apparently boat is the only way to get to this door. And then Holmes climbs up and bursts in the door. It's a room coated in lime. And Holmes taps on the floor with his stick. I don't believe it, he says. Some mistake in your calculations, says Watson. That's impossible, says Holmes.
Of course. Time for a jackhammer.
Completely ignoring the fact that the fishing rod wasn't quite 6 feet because he buried part of it in the ground, which would have affected the length of the shadow, and the paces that they were counting off as they went through the ritual were probably not made at the same length as those made by a cavalier in the 17th century, because they were shorter back then. So sure,
they're looking in the wrong place for the Ark of the Covenant.
But Watson helpfully reminds him, Holmes, you've forgotten the and under, the part of the ritual that ends with and under. And Holmes asks, is there a cellar under here? As old as the house, says Musgrave. So they race to the cellar. I'm still not quite clear how they got to the cellar. Did they get back on the boat, go around, go back inside? But in the cellar, there's a trap door with a scarf tied around the handle. There used to be wood all over the floor down here, and that's Brunton's muffler, exclaims Musgrave. I'd swear to it. So the 3 men work on opening the trap door. It's made of really heavy, thick stone. And Holmes, once they get it up and off, Holmes shines a lantern into the blackness beneath. Brunton is there, dead, bleeding, and he's sitting next to an open chest. The next thing we know, the place is swarming with police. Janet races across the lawn as Musgrave is talking with the detective inspector. Watson comes up to them both and says, I have some experience in forensic pathology. The man has been dead for 2 days. Cause of death, suffocation. No wound or bruise on his person, sir, Inspector asks. None, says Watson, but that's not true. Brunson's hands were scuffed and bleeding with the effort of trying to raise the trapdoor. I mean, again, consistency. Accident then, says the inspector. Oh, there's no doubt about it.
Watson was asked to stop being a forensic pathologist.
Yes. He must have been down there alone and the flagstone just fell shut on him, poor fellow, says Musgrave. Sir Reginald, I am told your butler was down in the cellar in an unused part of the house. What was his business there, sir? The inspector wants to know. And Musgrave, at this point, gets impatient. A butler's duties are many and varied, Inspector. I can't possibly answer that question. Well, no one would have heard his cries for help in that part of the house. That is the point, surely, Inspector, says Watson. The body's lifted up in what passes for a body bag back in those days, and as the servants and Janet are watching, Janet runs over and sees Brunton's dead face poking out from the bag, and she screams, Rachel, she done it. She killed him. That's why she ran away. Musgrave hisses at Tregallis to get his daughter and take her away. The servants are naturally upset, he tells the inspector. Well, who is this Rachel? The inspector wants to know. I mean, this guy won't quit. One of my housemaids, says Musgrave. She was engaged to Brunton. Please do cover him up. And when he disappeared, she became ill and left.
She's a fiery temper. She's Welsh, you know.
Exactly. Well, I shall want to see her. I shall want to see that young woman also, says the inspector. And the police take the body away. Musgrave and Watson go back to the cellar where Holmes is still working. Musgrave is going on about publicity because, of course, none of these aristocrats want to be in the papers. And that's still true today. Mm-hmm. When Holmes says, I must confess that so far I'm disappointed in my investigation. I had reckoned upon solving the matter when once I found the place referred to in the ritual. But now that I'm here, I am as far as ever from knowing what it was your family concealed with such elaborate precautions. You solved the mystery of Bretton, says Musgrave. But how did his fate come upon him? Musgrave is like so completely incurious about what's
anything.
yeah. And what part has been played by the woman who's disappeared, says Holmes.
So I would think when you put those two things together, it's pretty obvious what probably happened.
Especially because she was mad at Watson murmurs to Musgrave, I should explain Holmes's methods in such cases. He puts himself in the man's place, having first gauged his intelligence, and then he tries to imagine how he himself might have proceeded in similar circumstances. In this case, Bretton's intelligence was first rate, says Holmes. So you see, it is unnecessary to make allowance for the personal equation, as the astronomers have dubbed it, Watson says.
Yeah, according to Wikipedia, this term was used in 19th and early 20th century science. Meant that, coined by astronomers, it meant that if you had many observers making simultaneous observations, they would record slightly different values. And some of them the difference was significant enough that it would make for problems and larger calculations.
And discrepancies, yeah. Which is kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about how deeply the fishing line, the fishing pole is
strides and
yeah. I mean, it affects everything.
Yes, they're digging in the wrong place.
Yes. And Musgrave just stares at them like they're both out of their minds.
Yes, he does.
Holmes, meanwhile, is envisioning Brunson in the cellar wearing the scarf that was tied around the trapdoor handle. He knows something is concealed. He's spotted the place, but he's found the stone too heavy for a man to move unaided. So what does he do? Brunton is pictured trying to lift the stone. He ties his scarf around the handle of it, tries to lift it again. He gets it up part way. Help from outside? Holmes says, no one to trust. Help from inside? But who? Rachel. She still loves him. He sees it in her eyes for all her show of hate. Then we see Brunton waking Rachel and shushing her. I'm here to say I'm sorry, my love. I'm a foolish man. I don't deserve you. Blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Your promises, you make them so freely. You've never loved me, says Rachel. You're wrong. I love you for your beauty and your blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
This man is a selfish jerk.
Yes.
And how do we get out of here with no money? Rachel sensibly asks.
Mm-hmm.
I found all the money we need. I found something in this house all those country squires have missed. Now I found it and we're ready to go, but not without you. I couldn't live without you. I'm to be your husband. Oh, God. What money? What have you found? Rachel asks. I mean, she's really like getting to the point. Mm-hmm. Come with me and I'll show you, he says. So of course she does, dressed in her nightgown. They go to the cellar. There it is under that stone. All we have to do is lift it, he says. He tells her to pick up a piece of wood, and when he budges the flagstone, she's to wedge the wood underneath. After 2 pieces of wood, Rachel props up the flagstone with a 3rd piece of wood. They're looking down in the hole, which is dry, with a small chest in the corner. There's our treasure, says Brunton. That box was lying there for 2 centuries or more. We're going to steal it, she asks. How can you steal what nobody knows exists? He says. Well, then how did you know? She wants to know. Brains, my girl, history and mathematics. This man is so confident. So confident, in fact, that he goes into the hole while she holds the lamp, and then he opens the chest. And he's holding up these old pieces of metal. Mm-hmm. And Rachel starts laughing at him. Make our fortune. Oh, yes, that's a fine promise. Quiet. There must be some value in it, he says.
Yeah, they look like wet cardboard.
Yeah, these shards of metal.
Yeah.
Rusted, filthy. But he's doubling down because, of course, the sunk cost fallacy is ruling him right now. How clever are you? A pride more like, you're no better than your masters. Rachel's like seriously pissed off at him. Yeah. I know your cleverness, husband. You just needed me to help you. If it had been treasure, you'd have been off and away without me. You would have gone with her.
I mean, the way she's shrieking at him because things didn't work out with the treasure hunt, I would probably go without her too, to be honest.
Well, yes. But I mean, she's
But also he sucks. And
yes.
She is right about that.
Brunton is stuffing the metal pieces into the burlap sack. He hands it to her, but the wood is slipping under the weight of the flagstone trapdoor. And Rachel just watches as the wood finally completely slips and the flagstone comes crashing down, trapping him inside. Brunton is pleading with her, but she leaves the cellar with the bag and goes back to her bed. That would explain.
She starts crying because she feels bad, but
yeah, but she's not going to do anything about it.
no.
That would explain.
Well, I mean, I suppose she could have gone for help. She certainly couldn't have lifted it on her own if he could.
Right, but no, she's not going to go for help. She hates him. That would explain her blanched face and her fevered brain at breakfast the next morning, Holmes says. Meanwhile, Musgrave and Watson are sorting through the chest. Holmes is down in the hole. Nothing but fungi, says Musgrave. What was in the box, Holmes, says Watson. And Holmes's hand rises up from the hole. He's holding a coin.
It's a cool shot.
Yeah, it's a great shot. And Musgrave takes it from him. It's Charles I.
Yeah, kings had coins minted that would show their likeness on the coin.
They still do.
Do they?
Charles III. Yes. They take their time taking the old money out of circulation. But yes, he's had coins minted with his image the same way his mother did. And they're legal tender.
Okay.
We may find something else of Charles I, Holmes says. That bag that was fished from the mirror. Back at the house, Holmes is holding on his fingertip a small red cabochon. And Watson says, it's a jewel. Again, with the blazingly obvious. A family heirloom? It's possible, says Musgrave. Your ancestor, Sir Ralph Musgrave, was he a prominent cavalier? Holmes asks. Oh, yes, indeed. Yes. He was close to Charles II in his wanderings during the Commonwealth, Musgrave said. Then I think that should give us the last link we wanted. Gentlemen, you must bear in mind when the royal party were driven into exile, they probably left many of their most precious possessions buried behind them with the intention of returning for them in a more peaceful time. And Holmes is scraping away at one of the metal artifacts, the shards that they found in the bag. Gold, Musgrave. Watson, I believe you have in your hand a relic, which is not only of great intrinsic value, but also of great importance as a historical curiosity. At this point, the readers of the story at the time must have been thrilled because it was a centuries-old mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing less than a fragment of the ancient crown of the kings of England, Holmes tells them. Watson and Musgrave are amazed, but Holmes has the evidence as he pieces together the metal fragments into the crown.
The crown.
The three of them walk through the ritual again. Whose was it? Holmes recites. His who is gone, says Watson. That was the execution of Charles I, Holmes says. And then who shall have it? He who will come, says Musgrave. That was Charles II, says Holmes, whose advent was already foreseen. There can, I think, be no doubt, gentlemen, that this battered and shapeless diadem once encircled the brows of the royal Stuarts. But how came it to my family, Musgrave wants to know. When Charles I was executed, the crown was seized, broken into pieces, and sold for 1,000 guineas. Since then, there's been no trace of it until now, Holmes tells them. And then we flash back and see the cavalier again riding past the oak tree with a leather bag. Another man picks it up, clearly a forebear of Musgrave, because it is the actor playing Musgrave with long hair. But why would Charles not get it back on his return, says Watson. That is a question that may never be answered, says Holmes.
I don't know.
Helpfully, when your ancestor died by some oversight, he left this guide to his descendant without ever explaining the meaning of it. Father to son, mutters Musgrave, until at last it came within reach of a man who tore its secret out of it and lost his life in the venture, says Holmes. We flash back to see Brunton as the flagstone comes down. He's yelling for Rachel. And then we're back with the trap carrying Holmes and Watson and their luggage to the train station to head back to London. Was it chance the wood slipped? Watson asked. Was she only guilty of silence? She had a passionate Celtic soul.
As well, you know.
A man had wronged her. She had him in her power. Might it not have been vengeance that sent the stone crashing? Her hand that dashed it away? And what has become of her? Holmes has never met a non-English person he couldn't happily stereotype. Very probably she's far away from Hurlstone now and carries her secret with her, Holmes says as they drive away.
In a manner of speaking.
But Janet...
He's in a better place now.
Janet is by the lake playing with a little boat made out of wood with a leaf for a sail. And Rachel's body suddenly rises from the surface, bloated from drowning. She did throw herself into the lake. After all, the splash was big for a reason. Janet runs back to the manor house screaming, and the episode ends as she brings her father and a bunch of other men to the lake to see Rachel floating in her white gown.
To see Ophelia having drowned herself. That painting of Ophelia,
yes,
in water. That's exactly how the shot has it framed.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So crowns. The crown that was featured in the Musgrave Ritual was supposedly the crown of St. Edward the Confessor. When he died, it was kept in Westminster Abbey and was the first English crown that included arches on the top rather than just being a circlet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was used to crown subsequent kings. Eventually was used to crown Anne Boleyn, which was unprecedented. Henry VIII wore his own crown called the Tudor crown, which I'll get to in a minute. After Henry VIII, the monarchs were crowned with 3 crowns. First, the St. Edward's crown, then the Tudor crown, and then their own individual crowns made specially for them. So, yeah, the coronation was not just like, here, we're going to stick a crown on your head. We're going to stick 3.
The Revolution.
James I/4 decided to be crowned with St. Edward's crown and then his own. And he skipped the Tudor crown entirely. He was like, no, we're Stuarts now. Right. During the English Civil War, there was a lot of suspicion that Charles I had fled with St. Edward's crown. This turned out not to be true. And this was when the crown jewels first moved from Westminster Abbey to the Tower of London for safekeeping. After Charles I was executed, Parliament ordered that all the regalia be broken up, melted down, and the jewels sold. So the crown of Edward the Confessor was destroyed. And that's the crown that's the topic of the Musgrave Ritual. So, yeah, it's entirely fiction, this story. Because...
But it's a really cool story. I like it.
I love it. I love it. It's very... What is that movie with... Oh, National Archives or something with... A National Treasure with Nicolas Cage?
Yeah, I think it's National Treasure.
So, St. Edward's crown was well and truly destroyed. After Charles II, monarchs were crowned with a new St. Edward's crown, designed to look like the old one, but with more jewels.
Of course.
And a new state crown, because one's not enough. There was for a while a theory that the new St. Edward's crown is made from the melted down old crown, but that turned out not to be true. And it turns out that the new St. Edward's crown was also stolen by a self-styled Irish colonel named Thomas Blood, who conned his way into the jewel.
That's a great name.
I know, right? In the Tower of London. And as he was stealing it, he mashed it with a hammer so it would fit beneath his cloak. But he was caught just afterwards. And in a great mystery...
I put my hand to my mouth at the mashing part. You can't do that.
We just made a new one and you're wrecking it. Charles II, though, pardoned Blood and gave him a fortune. And nobody knows why.
Huh.
But eventually Blood was imprisoned for an unrelated offense and died shortly after his release. After the Stuarts,
oh well, I tried.
Yeah. After the Stuarts, the Hanovers, starting with George I, couldn't afford to own the jewels and the crowns. So they would hire them for use during the coronations and then strip them off and send them back. Especially during the reign of George IV, because he was wildly profligate. And yeah. And he himself had several crowns, the St. Edward's crown, the coronation crown of his own, which was incredibly large.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then there was the George IV state diadem, which is mostly diamonds and gold. And Queen Elizabeth wore that a lot, including for her stamp and her banknote portraits and the coins. It's the crown with no velvet cap of maintenance in it. It's just, it's just a diadem. When Charles III had his coronation recently, he was crowned with the new St. Edward's crown, jewels no longer hired, and then left Westminster Abbey in what's called the Imperial State Crown, which is slightly less heavy with smaller arches. And that's the one he wears at the openings of Parliament. So he only wore the St. Edward's crown to be crowned. And that's it. It goes back in the Tower of London and waits for the next, I guess, William. So that's about crowns.
Time for a revolution. I mean,
I know. I know.
These are just useless people.
And I mean, all of the regalia. Okay, so all of the stuff they used in Charles III's coronation, the only thing that predates Charles II is the spoon that they used to pour the anointing oil in. It's a special spoon.
Of course.
And that goes way, way back to medieval times. But that's that and the throne itself. Those are the only two things that have survived over time.
Oh.
The throne has lots of graffiti carved into it. It's really cool. I've seen it, and that does stay in Westminster Abbey. But the last time I was in London, they took it out and they took the St. Edward's crown and the Imperial State crown. All that was gone because they were getting them ready for the coronation.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a cool time to be there. Like, oh, yeah. I know these are missing. We're gonna see them again real soon.
I did not.
Just down with kings.
Yeah.
I mean, Cromwell was a pissant.
Down with Puritans too.
Yeah, exactly. Can we not find a happier way?
Yeah, thanks England for sending them all here.
Yeah. That formed the crazy basis of the 30% of this country that is still insane.
Yes. Yep. Thanks.
Any research that you did that we didn't get to?
I think we got to a lot of it. This was very interesting, the dip into history, and you can sort of see this romantic adventure being hinted at in the background. And there was a lot going on here.
The Cavaliers themselves were the epitome of romance in a lot of ways, right? Those big hats, velvet hats with the feathers.
Well, they were romantic in spite of that.
Right. I mean, they probably smelled to high heaven, but
yeah.
And the the anonymous mask that we see at protests is based on Charles II Charles I with his goatee and mustache, and a lot of the Cavaliers, mimic that style. So
I just keep thinking of the Three Musketeers, even though I know that has nothing to do with.
But that was the same style.
Yeah.
And the Roundheads, the Cromwell forces were just buzz killers, all of them.
Yeah.
With their big white collars and absolute hatred of anything joyful.
Exactly. Like, this will surely be better than a king.
If you ever watch the movie The Witch.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, with the father who's so fanatical in his Puritanism that even the Puritans in the town are like, dude, you're kind of over the top here.
Yeah, you're a freak.
Please leave.
Have to leave. Yeah. That's he was played by Ralph Ineson, who actually had a role in the BBC Sherlock series. He was captaining the boat in the last episode where he was the guy with his son on that fisherman boat that got too close to Sharonford. He's in a lot of stuff. I love his voice. It's so deep and resonant. Anyway,
I think he was in Game of Thrones too.
yes, he was. Oh God, the crossover. I mean, okay, again, 12 actors in all of England.
Yes.
And they just rotate them. The actors in this episode, though, I looked them all up. There isn't a whole lot, but the guy who played Musgrave was in The Empire Strikes Back.
Really?
Yeah.
Who was he in that?
Let me look him up again. Let's see. Okay, this will take me a minute, but that's okay.
Trying to think who.
People can go to the bathroom. Okay. His name is Michael Culver, and he played in The Empire Strikes Back. He did a lot of, I mean, these are all jobbing actors. They're in like everything. The butler was in Morse.
Just about everybody was in Morse.
I know, right?
That was another one that.
Morse, The Bill, which I've never seen, but it's like LA Law in a lot of ways.
Huh.
That, you know, in that all these jobbing actors have to go through it to get somewhere else. Oh, okay. So Musgrave, the guy who played him, Michael Culver, played Captain Nita in The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Get killed by Vader.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the fate of many people.
Yes. He was also in the Catafoul Mysteries. Yeah, with Derek Jacobi. I need to actually watch those. I haven't seen them.
They're good.
My mother loved them. And she loved the books too.
Yeah, the books are also good. We're probably done.
Okay. Anything else? I mean, we've run over, our usual time, but this was a dense episode with all of this history. Really, and I love the history part. I mean, and I love mullioned windows and gray archways.
We are fans of Oxford.
Yes. Or anything old.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what's on for next week?
Yeah, so that's all from us this week. If you've enjoyed the show and haven't subscribed yet, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support us, you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends. And join us next week when we'll be discussing the Abbey Grange.
Awesome. The first episode that was filmed for this series.
Yeah. Edward Hardwicke's first episode.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. All right. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.